Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent weekends at her grandfather's ranch learning to shoot bottles off fence posts. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, saw something special in the way she held a rifle. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, and, most importantly, she never flinched. The day she turned 18, Sarah walked into the Army recruitment office with mud still on her boots from the morning hunt. The recruiter, Sergeant Johnson, looked up from his paperwork expecting another farm boy looking for adventure. Instead, he saw a determined young woman with calloused hands and eyes that seemed to look right through him. "I want to be a sniper," she said without introduction. Sergeant Johnson almost laughed. In 2003, the military was still a man's world, especially in combat roles. Female snipers were almost unheard of in the U.S. military. But something about her quiet confidence made him pause. "You ever killed anything before?" he asked, testing her resolve. "Every deer I've shot has fed my family for weeks. I don't waste bullets, and I don't miss," she replied. The recruitment process was brutal. Sarah faced skepticism at every turn. During basic training at Fort Benning, her drill sergeants pushed her harder than the male recruits. They wanted her to quit, to prove that women didn't belong in their world. Instead, she excelled. She could outrun most of the men. Her rifle scores were consistently perfect, and she never complained about the harsh treatment. But it was during advanced individual training that Sarah truly proved herself. The obstacle course included a precision shooting challenge that had broken many aspiring snipers. Candidates had to hit targets at various distances while under physical and mental stress. The final shot was at 800 meters, a target the size of a dinner plate, while hanging upside down from a rope. Most soldiers took multiple attempts. Sarah hit it on her first try. Her instructor, Staff Sergeant Williams, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He had seen plenty of soldiers who could shoot well on a range, but crumbled under real pressure. After Sarah's performance, he pulled her aside. "I've been doing this for 12 years, he said. "I've never seen a recruit shoot like that. But being a sniper isn't just about shooting. You ready for what comes next?" Sarah's next assignment took her to Fort Bragg for specialized sniper training. The course had a 90% failure rate. Students learned camouflage techniques, advanced ballistics, weather reading, and, most challenging of all, the psychological preparation for taking human lives. The training was conducted in teams of 2. Sarah was paired with Corporal Mike Chun, a veteran who had initially protested being assigned with a woman. Their first exercise was a week-long field training where they had to remain hidden while observing a target building, reporting all movement without being detected. On the 3rd day, it started raining. Not a gentle drizzle, but a torrential downpour that turned their hiding spot into a muddy pit. Mike suggested they move to a drier location, but Sarah refused. She had studied the terrain and knew their current position was optimal for the mission, despite the discomfort. For 3 more days, they lay in the mud. Sarah never complained, never suggested abandoning the mission. She shared her food when Mike ran low, and when he fell asleep during his watch, she covered for him without saying a word. By the end of the exercise, Mike's opinion had completely changed. "You're not just good," he told her as they finally stood up from their muddy hide. "You're a natural." The final test of sniper school was the most challenging. Each student had to complete a solo mission, tracking and eliminating a target at an unknown distance while avoiding detection by instructors playing enemy forces. Sarah was given coordinates that led her to a valley surrounded by hills. Her target would appear somewhere in that valley for exactly 10 seconds at an unknown time during a 12-hour window. She spent 2 hours studying the terrain, wind patterns, and possible target locations. Then, she found her position, a rocky outcrop that provided both concealment and multiple sight lines. For the next 8 hours, she waited. No food, no water, just absolute focus on the valley below. When the target finally appeared, it was at 1,200 meters, nearly 3/4 of a mile away. Most soldiers would have considered it an impossible shot. Sarah didn't hesitate. She adjusted for wind, elevation, and humidity in seconds. Her shot was perfect. The instructors found her an hour later, still in position, still watching for secondary targets as she had been trained. When they told her she had passed, she simply nodded. She had never doubted she would succeed. Graduation day arrived with little fanfare. Sarah was one of only 6 soldiers to complete the course out of 30 who had started. As she received her sniper qualification badge, she thought about her grandfather. He had always told her that being different wasn't a weakness, it was her strength. The helicopter's rotors beat against the desert air as Sarah stared down at the endless brown landscape of Afghanistan. It was her first deployment, and, despite all her training, nothing had prepared her for the reality of war. The year was 2004, and the conflict was intensifying daily. Her new unit, the 82nd Airborne Division, was stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan. The base was a collection of concrete barriers, tents, and prefabricated buildings surrounded by mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Sarah quickly learned that those mountains hid dangers that could strike without warning. On her first night, she was assigned to the overnight watch in one of the guard towers. The sergeant who briefed her was clearly uncomfortable having a female sniper on his team. "Listen, Martinez," he said, avoiding eye contact. "I don't care what you did in training. This is the real deal. People die out here, and I'm not babysitting anyone." Sarah understood his concern. She was the only woman in a combat role on the entire base. Every move she made was being watched, every decision questioned. She knew that one mistake would not just reflect on her, but would be used to argue against other women in similar positions. Her first mission came 2 weeks later. Intelligence had reported Taliban fighters using a series of caves in the nearby mountains to store weapons and plan attacks on coalition forces. Sarah was assigned as overwatch for a team that would investigate the caves. The mission began before dawn. Sarah and her spotter, Private Rodriguez, climbed to a position overlooking the target area. It was a grueling 3-hour hike carrying full equipment, including her custom M24 sniper rifle. The position they reached was barely large enough for 2 people, wedged between rocks on a cliff face 800 feet above the valley floor. As the sun rose, the assault team moved into the valley below. Through her scope, Sarah could see everything clearly. The caves appeared empty, but she had learned to watch for the subtle signs that indicated human presence. A bird taking flight, disturbed rocks, even changes in the way light reflected off certain surfaces. It was during the 3rd hour of observation that Sarah noticed something wrong. A small flash of light from a cave that the assault team hadn't reached yet. Someone was using a mirror or piece of metal to signal. She was watching an ambush being coordinated. "Rodriguez, I've got movement in Cave 7, she whispered into her radio. Before Rodriguez could respond, Sarah saw the muzzle flashes. Taliban fighters had emerged from hidden positions and were firing down at the assault team. The soldiers below were trapped in the open with nowhere to take cover. Sarah's training took over. She identified the most dangerous threat first, a machine gunner position to cut off the team's escape route. The distance was 650 meters, with a crosswind that kept shifting as it moved through the mountain passes. She had to calculate not just the distance and wind, but also the angle of her shot since she was firing downward. Her first shot silenced the machine gun. The Taliban fighter simply disappeared behind his weapon. But there were more threats. Sarah began working systematically through the enemy positions, each shot carefully aimed and perfectly executed. In less than 5 minutes, she had eliminated 7 enemy fighters. The assault team was able to withdraw safely, but the mission had changed everyone's perception of the quiet woman with the rifle. Word spread quickly through the base. The female sniper had saved an entire squad. But success brought new challenges. Within days, Sarah found herself targeted by enemy propaganda. The Taliban had learned about the American woman soldier, and they put a bounty on her head. Local fighters were specifically hunting for her. The psychological pressure was intense. Sarah knew that every mission could be her last, not just because of the normal dangers of combat, but because she had become a symbol that the enemy wanted to destroy. She started receiving death threats in broken English, slipped under her bunk, or left where she would find them. Despite the threats, Sarah's reputation continued to grow. Her commanding officer, Colonel Harris, began assigning her to the most critical missions. She provided overwatch for special operations raids, eliminated high-value targets, and protected convoys moving through dangerous territory. One mission stood out above all others. Intelligence had located a Taliban commander responsible for a series of devastating attacks on coalition forces. He was hiding in a compound in a village 30 miles from the base, but the location made a traditional raid impossible. Too many civilians, too many escape routes, and too much risk of collateral damage. Sarah was given a mission that seemed impossible even by her standards. She would have to infiltrate enemy territory alone, find a position within range of the target, and wait for the perfect moment to take the shot. The target would only be vulnerable for minutes at most, during his daily prayer time when he appeared on the roof of his compound. The insertion was done by helicopter at night, dropping Sarah 15 miles from the target. She had to carry enough food and water for 3 days, plus all her equipment. The weight was crushing, but she had trained for this. Moving only at night and hiding during the day, it took her 2 days to reach a suitable position. She found an abandoned building that gave her a clear line of sight to the target compound, 980 meters away. The building had been damaged by bombing, leaving gaps in the walls that provided perfect shooting positions while maintaining concealment. On the third morning, Sarah had been in position for 18 hours when her target finally appeared. The Taliban commander emerged onto his rooftop exactly as intelligence had predicted. But he wasn't alone. A young boy, probably his son, stood beside him. This was the moment every sniper dreaded. Sarah had a clear shot at her target, but the risk to the innocent child was significant. The rules of engagement were clear, but the decision was hers alone to make. She waited. For 20 agonizing minutes, she tracked her target through her scope while he prayed with the child beside him. Just when it seemed the opportunity would pass, the boy ran inside. For exactly 3 seconds, Sarah had a clear shot. She took it. The mission was complete, but the extraction was still ahead. Now, every Taliban fighter in the area would be searching for the sniper who had killed their leader. The hunt for Sarah began immediately after the Taliban commander's death. She could hear vehicles moving through the village below, shouting voices, and the distinct sound of weapons being loaded. Her extraction wasn't scheduled for another 6 hours, and the abandoned building that had been perfect for the shot was now a trap. Sarah knew she couldn't stay in the building. The Taliban would search every structure in the area systematically. She had to move, but movement in daylight meant almost certain detection. The only advantage she had was that her enemies were angry and acting without their usual caution. She gathered her equipment and studied the terrain around her position. There was a drainage ditch that ran behind the building, deep enough to provide concealment, but leading directly toward the enemy search area. It was dangerous, but it was her only option. For the next 4 hours, Sarah crawled through the ditch. The concrete was rough and tore at her uniform, and stagnant water soaked through her boots. Every few minutes, she heard voices getting closer or farther away as search teams moved through the area. Twice, Taliban fighters passed directly over her hiding spot. When the sun began to set, Sarah reached the extraction point, a flat area 2 miles outside the village where a helicopter could safely land. But she wasn't alone. A group of Taliban fighters had positioned themselves near the landing zone, clearly expecting the American sniper to attempt escape by air. Sarah counted at least 8 fighters, armed with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. Her radio had been damaged during the crawl through the drainage ditch, so she couldn't warn the incoming helicopter crew about the ambush. She had to eliminate the entire group before the extraction bird arrived. The fighters had positioned themselves in a loose circle around the landing zone, each man about 50 meters from the next. Sarah realized that once she fired her first shot, she would have less than 30 seconds before the remaining fighters located her position and returned fire. She planned her shots carefully. Start with the fighters carrying the RPGs, then the machine gunner, then work through the rest as quickly as possible. Distance was 400 to 600 meters from her position to the various targets. Sarah's first shot eliminated the RPG operator positioned farthest from her location. Before his body hit the ground, she had acquired her second target. The machine gunner never had a chance to return fire. Her third shot dropped the second RPG operator. Now the remaining fighters knew they were under attack, but they couldn't see where the shots were coming from. In their panic, they made the mistake of moving to positions that gave Sarah even clearer shots. Within 2 minutes, all 8 Taliban fighters were down. The helicopter arrived exactly on schedule. As Sarah ran toward the landing zone, she could see more vehicles approaching in the distance. The pilot didn't wait for her to get fully aboard before lifting off. As they climbed away from the landing zone, Sarah could see dozens of Taliban fighters arriving at the site where she had just been. Back at the base, Sarah's mission was classified at the highest levels. Only a few people knew the details of what she had accomplished, but word spread anyway. She had eliminated a high-value target under impossible conditions and fought her way out alone when everything went wrong. Colonel Harris called her to his office the next morning. With him was a man Sarah didn't recognize, dressed in civilian clothes, but clearly military by his bearing. "Martinez, this is Agent Thompson from CIA," the colonel said. "He has a proposition for you." Thompson studied Sarah for a moment before speaking. "We've been watching your career, Sergeant Martinez. Your skills are exactly what we need for a special program we're developing. Joint operations between regular military and special forces units." The program Thompson described was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. She would be attached to various special operations teams as needed, providing sniper support for the most sensitive and dangerous missions. The work would be even more classified than her current assignments, and the risks would be significantly higher. "Why me?" Sarah asked. "Because you're invisible," Thompson replied. "The enemy expects American snipers to be male. They're not looking for someone like you. That gives you an advantage that could save a lot of lives." Sarah accepted the assignment without hesitation. Within a week, she was transferred to a classified location where she began training with some of the most elite soldiers in the American military. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Delta Force operators, and Air Force pararescue specialists. The training was unlike anything she had experienced. These weren't regular soldiers learning basic skills. These were the best of the best, and they pushed each other to levels of performance that seemed impossible. Sarah had to prove herself all over again, but this time among men who were accustomed to working with the finest soldiers in the world. Her first mission with a SEAL team came 3 weeks later. The target was a compound in northern Afghanistan where high-level Taliban and al-Qaeda leaders were meeting. The mission required infiltrating heavily defended territory, eliminating specific targets, and extracting before enemy reinforcements could respond. The SEAL team leader was Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, a veteran of multiple deployments with a reputation for never losing a man. When he was briefed about Sarah joining his team, his response was direct. "I don't care if she's the best sniper in the Army," he told his superiors. "My team works like a machine. Adding someone new, especially someone who's never worked with SEALs, could get people killed." But Morrison was a professional, and his orders were clear. He would work with Sarah, but she would have to prove she belonged among his elite operators. The mission began with a night insertion by helicopter 30 miles from the target. The team would move on foot through mountain terrain, establish an observation post overlooking the compound, and wait for the right moment to strike. Sarah quickly realized that working with SEALs was different from anything she had experienced. These men moved through dangerous territory like ghosts, communicating with hand signals, and maintaining perfect discipline even under extreme stress. Every member of the team was capable of making life-or-death decisions independently. On the second night of the mission, as they observed the target compound, Sarah noticed something the others had missed. A small building separate from the main compound showed signs of recent construction and had different security procedures than the rest of the facility. "Commander," she whispered to Morrison, "that building doesn't match the intelligence reports. I think there's something important there." Morrison studied the building through his own scope. Sarah was right. The intelligence they had been given was incomplete. The mission parameters would have to change, and that meant additional risks for his team. It was at this moment that Lieutenant Commander Morrison began to understand why Sarah had been assigned to his team. She didn't just follow orders and shoot targets. She was a soldier who could think, adapt, and contribute to the success of the mission beyond her specific role. The discovery of the unknown building changed everything about the mission. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had to make a critical decision with incomplete information, and Sarah's observation had created a complication that could either lead to a major intelligence victory or disaster for his team. Morrison gathered his team for a quick briefing. In whispered voices, they discussed their options. The original mission was to eliminate 3 high-value targets who were meeting in the main compound. But the mysterious building that Sarah had identified could contain intelligence valuable enough to justify the additional risk of investigating it. Martinez, how certain are you about that building? Morrison asked. 100%, Commander. The construction is recent, probably within the last month. The guards rotate differently there, and I've seen people in civilian clothes going in and out. That's not happening at the main compound. Morrison made his decision. They would split the mission into 2 phases. First, Sarah would provide overwatch while the team investigated the mysterious building. Then, they would proceed with the original plan to eliminate the targets in the main compound. As the team prepared to move, Morrison pulled Sarah aside. If something goes wrong down there, your job is to get us out. I don't care about the mission, I don't care about orders. You keep my boys alive. Understood. Understood, Commander. The SEAL team moved like shadows toward the compound. Sarah positioned herself on a ridge overlooking both the mysterious building and the main compound. Through her night vision scope, she could see everything happening below. The team reached the building without detection, but as they began to breach the entrance, everything went wrong. An alarm system that hadn't appeared in any intelligence report suddenly activated. Lights flooded the compound, and Sarah could see armed guards running from multiple directions. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. We've got the intel, but we're pinned down. Multiple hostiles converging on our position. Through her scope, Sarah could see the situation developing. The SEAL team was trapped inside the building with enemy fighters surrounding them. But she also noticed something else. The guards were leaving the main compound undefended as they responded to the alarm. Sarah made a tactical decision that went against her direct orders. Instead of focusing solely on protecting the SEAL team, she began systematically eliminating the high-value targets in the main compound while they were exposed and vulnerable. Her first shot dropped a man who intelligence had identified as a major Taliban commander. Her second shot eliminated an al-Qaeda operative who had been responsible for attacks across the region. Her third shot took out a bomb maker whose devices had killed dozens of coalition soldiers. All 3 primary mission targets were eliminated before they could escape or take cover. Now Sarah could focus on extracting the SEAL team. The guards surrounding Morrison's team were positioned in a courtyard with limited cover. Sarah began picking them off methodically, starting with those in positions to cut off the team's escape route. Each shot was precisely placed, and each enemy fighter that fell reduced the pressure on the trapped SEALs. Martinez, we're moving to the north wall. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece. Can you clear our path? Sarah could see the route Morrison intended to take. 3 enemy fighters were positioned to intercept them, but they were confident in their cover and not expecting sniper fire from her position. Path is clear in 5 seconds, she responded. 3 shots, 3 targets eliminated. The SEAL team moved swiftly along the north wall and reached their planned extraction point. But their troubles weren't over. Enemy reinforcements were arriving from the surrounding area, and the helicopter extraction was still 20 minutes away. Morrison's team took defensive positions in a rocky area outside the compound, but they were outnumbered and running low on ammunition. Sarah could see vehicle-mounted machine guns positioning themselves to assault the SEAL team's location. The vehicles were at the maximum range of her rifle, over 1,100 meters away, but Sarah had no choice. If those machine guns opened fire on Morrison's position, the SEAL team wouldn't survive until extraction. Her first shot at the lead vehicle was a direct hit on the machine gunner. The second vehicle's crew realized they were under sniper attack and began taking evasive action. But Sarah had already calculated their likely movements. Her next shot disabled the vehicle's driver, sending it careening off the road. The remaining enemy forces now knew they were facing a highly skilled sniper, but they couldn't locate her position. Sarah was too far away and too well concealed. For the next 15 minutes, she methodically eliminated threats as they appeared, keeping the enemy at a distance until the extraction helicopter arrived. As Morrison's team boarded the helicopter, Sarah began her own movement to the secondary extraction point 3 miles away. But her movement had been detected, and now she was being pursued by the remaining Taliban fighters. The chase lasted 2 hours. Sarah moved through terrain she had memorized during mission planning. using every piece of cover and concealment available. Several times, enemy fighters came close enough that she could hear their conversations, but her camouflage and fieldcraft kept her hidden. When she finally reached the extraction point, Sarah was exhausted, dehydrated, and nearly out of ammunition. But she had accomplished something remarkable. She had eliminated all 3 primary targets, extracted intelligence from the mysterious building, and brought every member of the SEAL team home safely. The helicopter ride back to base was quiet. Morrison's team was processing what they had experienced. They had worked with many different specialists over the years, but never with anyone who had demonstrated Sarah's level of skill and tactical thinking under pressure. As they approached the landing zone, Morrison spoke to Sarah over the helicopter's internal communication system. "Martinez, what you did tonight was outstanding. I've never seen shooting like that, and I've worked with the best snipers in the military." "Thank you, Commander. Your team made it possible." "No," Morrison replied. "Your team made it possible. You're a SEAL now, as far as I'm concerned." Coming from Lieutenant Commander Morrison, this was the highest praise Sarah could receive. SEALs were known for their exclusive brotherhood and reluctance to accept outsiders. But Sarah had proven herself in the most demanding circumstances possible. When they landed at the base, Morrison did something unprecedented. As Sarah stepped off the helicopter, he snapped to attention and rendered a crisp military salute. It wasn't required by regulation, and it wasn't expected, but it was Morrison's way of showing the respect that Sarah had earned. The other SEAL team members followed their commander's example. 6 elite special operations soldiers, men who had served in the most dangerous missions around the world, stood at attention and saluted a young woman from Texas who had proven that courage and skill have nothing to do with gender. The salute from Lieutenant Commander Morrison and his SEAL team marked a turning point in Sarah's military career, but it also brought challenges she hadn't anticipated. Word of the incident spread throughout the special operations community, creating both admirers and critics of the female sniper who had earned the respect of some of the military's most elite soldiers. Within days of the mission, Sarah was summoned to a meeting with General Patricia Hayes, the highest-ranking woman in the Army at that time. General Hayes had built her career fighting against the barriers that prevented women from serving in combat roles, and Sarah's success represented a validation of everything she had worked toward. "Sergeant Martinez," General Hayes began, "your recent actions have created quite a stir. There are people in this building who want to use your story to promote women in combat roles, and others who want to bury it completely." Sarah remained silent, understanding that her response to this moment would affect not just her own career, but the opportunities available to other women who might follow in her footsteps. "What I need to know," the general continued, "is what you want. Do you want to become a symbol, a spokesperson for women in the military? Or do you want to continue being a soldier?" The question struck at the heart of Sarah's internal conflict. She had never wanted to be a pioneer or a symbol. She had simply wanted to serve her country and use her skills to protect fellow soldiers. But she also understood that her success carried responsibilities beyond her personal preferences. "General, I want to continue being a soldier," Sarah replied. "But I also understand that other women are watching what happens to me. If I can help open doors for them by being successful, then that's what I need to do." General Hayes smiled. "That's exactly the answer I hoped to hear. Your next assignment will test both your skills as a soldier and your strength as a person." The assignment was unlike anything Sarah had expected. She would be attached to a joint task force responsible for training Iraqi and Afghan military snipers. The mission was not just to teach shooting skills, but to help build the capacity of Allied forces to fight their own battles. The training facility was located in a secure area of Iraq, where conditions were dangerous but somewhat more stable than the active combat zones where Sarah had been operating. Her students would be a mix of Iraqi military personnel and tribal fighters who had allied with coalition forces. When Sarah arrived at the training facility, she immediately understood the complexity of her new role. Her students were all men, many of whom came from cultures where women were not permitted to serve in military roles. Some had never taken orders from a woman, and several made it clear that they questioned her authority to teach them. The facility commander, Colonel Michael Rodriguez, briefed Sarah on the challenges she would face. These men are brave fighters, he explained. But they've been told their entire lives that women belong at home, not on the battlefield. You'll have to prove yourself to them in a way that male instructors never have to. Sarah's first class included 12 students from various Iraqi military units. When she walked into the classroom, the response was immediate. Some students exchanged skeptical looks, others whispered among themselves, and a few simply stared in disbelief. "Gentlemen," Sarah began in Arabic, which she had learned during her deployment, "I am Sergeant Martinez. I will be teaching you advanced sniper techniques. I know some of you may have concerns about learning from a woman. I understand those concerns, but I'm here to help you become better soldiers." One student, a veteran Iraqi sergeant named Hassan, raised his hand. "With respect, Sergeant Martinez, how can you teach us to fight when women do not fight in my country?" Sarah had anticipated this question. "Sergeant Hassan, you are correct that our cultures are different. But bullets do not care about culture. A well-placed shot stops an enemy regardless of who pulls the trigger. My job is to teach you to place those shots accurately." Over the following weeks, Sarah systematically dismantled the skepticism of her students through demonstration and results. On the rifle range, her shooting was flawless. During tactical exercises, her knowledge and experience were evident. Most importantly, her teaching methods were effective, and her students' skills improved dramatically. The breakthrough came during the 4th week of training. Hassan, who had been one of the most skeptical students, approached Sarah after a particularly challenging shooting exercise. "Sergeant Martinez," he said quietly, "I must apologize. When I first saw you, I thought this was some American joke. But you have taught me things about shooting that I never knew. You have made me a better soldier." Hassan's change in attitude influenced the other students. By the end of the training program, Sarah had earned the complete respect of her class. Several students specifically requested to continue working with her on advanced techniques. But Sarah's success in the training role led to an unexpected opportunity. Intelligence had identified a high-value target operating in the region, but he was protected by extremely tight security and stayed in areas where traditional military operations would be impossible. The target was a bomb maker responsible for devices that had killed dozens of coalition soldiers and hundreds of Iraqi civilians. He lived in a heavily defended compound in a city where coalition forces could not operate openly without triggering massive civilian casualties. Sarah was approached by Agent Thompson, the CIA operative who had recruited her into special operations work, with a proposal that was both an honor and a tremendous risk. "We need someone who can get close to this target without being suspected," Thompson explained. "Someone who doesn't fit the profile of an American soldier. Your success with the Iraqi training program has given us an idea." The plan was audacious. Sarah would pose as a foreign journalist writing about women's roles in post-war Iraq. Her cover would allow her to move through areas where American soldiers couldn't go, and her real identity would be hidden behind a carefully constructed false background. The mission would require Sarah to operate completely alone, without backup or support, in one of the most dangerous cities in Iraq. If her cover was blown, there would be no possibility of rescue. She would be on her own against an entire network of enemy fighters. Sarah accepted the mission without hesitation. The preparation took 3 weeks. Sarah learned to speak Arabic with the accent of a Lebanese journalist, studied the background of the character she would portray, and memorized details about journalism that would stand up to casual questioning. When she entered the city, Sarah carried only the equipment that a real journalist would have. Her sniper rifle was disassembled and hidden inside camera equipment, and her ammunition was disguised as camera batteries. For 5 days, Sarah played her role perfectly. She interviewed women in the city about their lives, wrote articles that would never be published, and gradually gathered intelligence about her target's location and routine. On the 6th day, she identified the perfect opportunity. Her target would be attending a meeting in a building that provided her with a clear shot from a window in a nearby hotel. The distance was 700 meters, a challenging shot made more difficult by the need to fire through glass without being detected. Sarah took the shot at precisely 3:47 p.m. local time. Her target was eliminated instantly, and the chaos that followed provided her with the cover she needed to escape the city. The mission was a complete success, but, more importantly, It demonstrated that Sarah had evolved from a skilled sniper into a complete special operations soldier capable of handling the most complex and sensitive missions. When she returned to base, Sarah found a message waiting for her. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had requested her for his next mission. The SEAL team leader had discovered what many others in the special operations community were beginning to understand. Sarah Martinez wasn't just an exceptional female soldier. She was simply an exceptional soldier.